So again, please welcome Everette Rochon.
Thank you, Craig. Hey, good morning, everyone. I don't know if you heard the music there as before I came out. So the music selection was Bad Mama Jamma, and I think I'm falling in love. So I'm not sure if they chose that music to introduce the FAA, but anyway, I feel like I got to apologize for my attire as well. I mean, you guys are out there with your open collar shirts, and I was hoping somebody was going to cut this tie off before I made it up here. But it's an FAA requirement, so they levy requirements on us too. So you guys are lucky. You get what you get. All right. So in 2009, I joined the FAA. And that was after a variety of aviation training and aviation training device experience. And that was from my time in the Navy as a naval flight officer, NATOPS officer, doing instructing, then a Part 141 flight instructor, then the airlines, and then I worked with the Air Force and a variety of flight simulator programs before joining the FAA. So I say all that to say that you couldn't have a better friend in me when it comes to the job that you do and appreciation for the task that you accomplish every single day for aviation safety and in pilot training. So today, I want to thank too Redbird Migration for inviting me, and I could share with you guys some of the things that we have on the horizon here in the General Aviation and Commercial Division and the Training and Certification Group. I'm the manager of the Training and Certification Group. We've got about 20 folks that work for me, and we cover everything. Part 61, Part 141, aviation training device, regulation and policy applications, and authorizations. So I sign those authorizations based on our team's recommendations. So again, I'm going to share with you some of the things, from a policy and regulation standpoint that we've been focused on, and I think it'll give you a kind of a sense of where we are and where we're going. I'll kind of stand out of the way here. So this is our vision, the General Aviation Commercial Division vision. So a lot of people would say that this is a lofty goal, an unattainable goal. But we really believe, and my division manager, Brad Palmer, believes that this is a necessary goal. This is what we have to aspire to. We have to set the bar as high as we can to achieve and to continue reducing the GA fatal accident rate. So here's some data from NTSB, and that trend line is accurate. It's been generally going down, and I think that's very important, and you all are a big reason for that trend line. I took a look at the NTSB data this morning, and it's still generally trending in that direction, and I'll talk about some of the things within that data that we're seeing. Some of this data you can see is 2020, 2021, but all of this data gets updated over time. This is some data from the FAA, from the Office of Accident Investigation and Prevention, and this is as of the latest data, 19 March. So the number, the minus 27 is a good number. That's 27 fatal accidents under where we would be in a trend line in order to keep that reduction going. The number that you see there, the 130, if that number is over 0, that's a bad number, and I'm sure you understand why. This Pareto chart, it's kind of an eye chart along the bottom there, but the important piece of information is on the far left-hand side, and that's loss of control in flight. So as you can see, it is still far and above the one of the defining events for accidents across the different types of aircraft. And that NTSB data also showed that a lot of these loss of control incidents, not just in flight, but on the ground, and in particular during the landing, approach and landing, but really the landing phase of flight. Accident by flight purpose and aircraft category. This is 2019 data, and I've highlighted the instructional line there. Number 2 in this list, it kind of goes down and then kind of starts again on the other side there. But instructional accident by purpose is number 2 on that list. So I start with that accident data because it is the primary focus. It is the primary focus of our organization. And even with all of the distractions that we face on a daily basis, that's what we try to remain focused on. We support the FAA's mission there, which is to operate the safest aerospace system in the world. So the General Aviation and Commercial Division in safety standards is the premier organization from a policy and regulation standpoint to support the FAA's mission, again, for general aviation. So within our organization, we have set up some objectives and goals, as you can see there under the sub-bullet of continuous improvement of GA safety regulations and policies. So to just highlight a couple of words there, so improved training structure, access to modern training equipment used for flight instruction, and align regulation with current risks and practices. We want to remove unnecessary obsolete requirements, reviews, and approvals, and promote emerging technologies. From a personal standpoint, there's no question that my personal goal, and we support that within our organization, and my division manager supports it too, is we start with the premise of having the lightest touch possible when it comes to regulation, the lightest touch possible. So again, personal philosophy and the philosophy I try to bring to rulemaking when those opportunities arise is to start from that lightest touch possible. And we can continue to have that philosophy as long as you all are continuing to do the fantastic job you're doing out there as flight training operators, as simulator manufacturers, in order to keep that trend line moving in the right direction. Changing landscape, absolutely. The landscape is continually changing. You know that we're approaching. I think we're at this year 120 years since Kitty Hawk, and I think the landscape is changing is now as much as it ever has. And so drones, the FAA is already teeing up the next level of drone regulations and eventually integration into the NAS. Powered lift aircraft like the AW609 there, and then rotorcraft as well as powered lift with new and emerging technology when it comes to flight controls, types of aircraft like you see represented there. These are all of the things that we are trying to both implement while at the same time being focused on the existing operations and aircraft in the NAS and keeping that safety trend line going downwards. And that's working with our international partners as well, so that as we continue to implement these type of technologies into the NAS, that we're doing that as much as we can in concert with them. Personnel licensing, specifically electronic personnel licensing, is one of those avenues. So the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, has recently required member states to implement acceptance of electronic personnel licensing. And so we're working in concert with them to meet those requirements, as well as implement those requirements within the U.S., because we think it's also the right thing to do. Rulemaking projects. So these are 5 of our highest priority rulemaking projects that we're supporting. All of them are in the notice of proposed rulemaking stage, and I'll start there from the top with powered lift. The powered lift rulemaking, the goal there is to implement pilot training and certification avenue for civil pilots to operate powered lift aircraft. What you see there on the top right hand corner, providing for an SFAR, and SFAR is a special federal aviation regulation that is, in this case, is going to be used to implement the regulations, both the pilot training and certification regulations, as well as certain operational regulations, in order for the FAA to do this in an environment that is, for lack of a better word, contained and separate from the other CFRs, so that then as we learn and this SFAR is eventually sunsetted, then more permanent regulations can be implemented into 14 CFR. Expecting that notice of proposed rulemaking to publish this year. MOSAIC. MOSAIC is an acronym. It stands for the Modernization of Special Airworthiness Certificates. It has many parts to it that have a goal of correcting some things in regulation existing now, and also moving forward other parts of the regulations. I think what's important to this group is that the intent of the regulation, one of the things that we're hoping to get out of the regulations, is to performance-base the regulations for light sport aircraft, make them more robust, make them more useful for the flight training environment. There's going to be more room for safety-enhancing equipment, more power being more safety margin, and then have those aircraft being able to be operated by sport pilots with the right training, obviously. And then these aircraft with this higher capability and the pilots with the right training will be able to progress into the higher grades of certificate, and the aircraft itself will be able to be used by pilots with higher grade certificates. So that's kind of some of the larger conceptual things that I can share of some of the goals when it comes to MOSAIC that you may be interested in. ACS-PTS, the Airman Certification Standards Incorporation by Reference. This rulemaking published in the end of last year, went through the comment period. The comment period is already closed on that. And but the goal of this regulation is not to have any substantive changes when it comes to the ACS or PTS. There's no changes with respect to the practical tests and the way that is accomplished. The goal here is to just incorporate the ACS, PTS into the regulations, kind of take it out of the policy realm, and that's just mainly to comply with the Administrative Procedures Act. PAO-SAC, that stands for Public Aircraft Operations Special Airworthiness Certificates. There's a longer, fancier name for that rulemaking. When this rulemaking was first developed, it was to really incorporate into it the ability of public aircraft operators, so those not operating civilly, to accrue and log flight time kind of beyond what's in the regulations now. But tagged on to that, and what is kind of interest to this group is the LOTA aspects of that regulation. So this regulation will incorporate into it and clarify some of those requirements in order to when a LOTA will be necessary for providing and receiving flight training in a limited experimental or primary category aircraft. Lastly, flight instructor expiration date. That is a notice of proposed rulemaking. Hopefully that will be coming out in the next few months. So the goal here is to remove the expiration date from the flight instructor certificate, and that way to align this certificate with other certificates, it's going to be experience-based. It's going to be recency-based, so that flight instructors will be able to exercise the privileges or not based on that recency. So we think that's going to be, and there's some other aspects within that rulemaking as well, and we think that's going to be well received once it's published. So here are some additional priorities that we're working. The training in Robinson helicopters. So for years, SFAR 73 and the requirements in it have been misaligned with the airworthiness directives which then drove the limitations section and some of the placards that are in the Robinson helicopters, and that has led to some confusion about how to conduct training and other requirements within the helicopter for the 22 and the 44. We had a safety risk management panel over the last year. That was an FAA industry risk management panel, which zeroed in on some of those risks that existed within the SFAR. And so it was that risk management panel which we used as a springboard to initiate rulemaking. So we're in the very early stages of that rulemaking, and then one of the outcomes that we hope from this rulemaking is to potentially sunset the SFAR 73. Really, the intent of all SFARs is that they have an expiration date, that they just don't go on continually. So this, after some period of time, hopefully the SFAR will sunset, and then as determined and as decided, what requirements will then be incorporated into Core 14 CFR. Next, Part 141 modernization. I think Part 141 was published in the late 70s, and really, when I came into this job, I don't know how many, maybe a year and a half ago, somewhere around there, then it was one of the first things I heard from my team. I think it's something that our team has always supported, our division manager supports, and then some of the anecdotal conversations I've had with you all and others have supported a necessity to open rulemaking for Part 141. At a minimum, to do some cleanup work there that makes the regulation hard to follow, maybe some unnecessary requirements in it, things that can be modernized, some barriers that can be reduced, some efficiencies that can be gained. And so the key thing, the message I want to relay with respect to this Part 141 potential rulemaking, and I do have to say potential rulemaking because all of this is pre-decisional and it's got to work its way up through the normal process. But one of my goals is to engage with you, to engage with industry on this ahead of time. I think all the seen and we've experienced also in the FAA where we go through the rulemaking process and then we have a notice of proposed rulemaking and it's either well received or not, and we receive comments, and that's the way the process works. But I think there's much more room, and I think there's a better job that we can do to engage with industry ahead of rulemaking, to get that feedback ahead of time, to learn what are some of the things that if you all had your magic wand, what would you do to make these regulations better, more efficient? This is where the FAA has the greatest touch point when it comes to pilot training, certification, oversight of facilities, and the way that training is conducted, and even credit towards reducing hours. So we have high interest in making sure that these regulations are where they should be and not still kind of back in time, before some of the things that we know now, with the advancement of aircraft, the advancement of simulators, the competency-based training, and some of those things that we have data on right now. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying, that I'm supporting integration of competency-based training into Part 141. I am saying I don't want that off the table. And I think as we go through that process, which is the normal rulemaking process, and this type of engagement with industry, and we have data that can support decisions for that type of consideration, I think there could be room for that type of conversation to occur. So in the coming months, please be on the lookout for us to reach out, and we may do it kind of in smaller, more focused groups in order to have these conversations. We're doing our homework on our side to kind of make sure where we want to kind of scope this out, because I think we may want to do this in phases, I'm not sure, but we don't want to take too big of a bite out of this and then the rulemaking could just stall. So I think there's some things we can do right up front to try to fix some things, to gain efficiencies, and then in the longer term, kind of look more strategically on what do we want from Part 141 and a modernization effort. Electronic pilot licenses, I already touched on that to a degree. We have the effort that's going on in the CAO side of the house, the international community, but then domestically, we also obviously think it's the right thing to do to move towards electronic licensing. It's already being done in several states when it comes to driver's licenses. We think there's room to do that, obviously, with pilot certificates, and that's just going to become a springboard to a more electronic cockpit airworthiness certificate, registration certificates, other documentation that needs to be carried on board the aircraft and with the pilot. Electric propulsion. In the early stages of making sure that we have reduced and eliminated the barriers for advancement of electric propulsion, we know that obviously there's a high demand to use these aircraft on the flight line, and we absolutely support that. It has to go, these type of aircraft, they'll have to go through the process with the aircraft evaluation division, and there'll be some joint determinations with my organization and the aircraft evaluation division on what type of training is necessary for these differences in propulsion and what those different training looks like. So we're having those conversations now. I mentioned Mosaic earlier. Mosaic is, that's going to require a change to the 1.1 definition for a light sport aircraft, because within that definition, it limits the type of propulsion. So that's just an example of some of the areas that we're looking in order to reduce and eliminate those barriers to advanced propulsion systems. And making sure, of course, that the right knowledge, skill, and ability is embodied in the pilot to safely operate those aircraft. So, what else? What else is from my perspective? I think as we look at this kind of continuum here that we see, one of the things I think that I'm looking forward to is data. During the last the General Aviation Joint Safety Committee is the new name, but the GAJSC, there were some anecdotal discussions about a downturn in pass rates, in first-time pass rates. And I think it was that discussion really that started pulling a string about, hey, what data do we have at our disposal? What can we put our finger on now so that we, one, have an accurate picture of what that data looks like, right? Is there a downturn? How soon after this downturn is occurring are we seeing this show up in the data? What type of data do we have when it comes to first-time pass rates? Is it second-time pass rates? Is it the same person failing multiple times? What are we seeing as far as tasks that are being failed? It's that type of data that we're working to get our hands on. So that was a question that was kind of raised through the GAJSC, but since then we have seen a potential synergy with a data subgroup that is within the ACS, or the Airman Certifications Work Group. So we've had some discussions internally to kind of figure out, hey, where are those synergies? Where is that subgroup, and what we're discussing in the GAJSC, where do they align? So we're not kind of working, duplicative efforts there. But I think the key point there is to really say, hey, we really need to get our hands around more accurate data with respect to that. So we're not talking anecdotally about what could be, designees or others are seeing, but we're really seeing this hard data there. And not only that, but we can use that data then to be proactive about the type of training we're doing, what tasks are being failed, why, and then try to get ahead of any potential safety implications that could be occurring out in the NAS. So that's one area. And then I think another area too that we're trying to get our hands around internally in advance is the advent of virtual reality and mixed reality in simulators. Augmented reality is another area. So, I'm far from an expert in those areas, but definitely want to start learning a lot more. We have a team, as I mentioned before, within our organization that does these ATD evaluations. And so we're in the stages now of learning and kind of understanding what exists out there technology-wise, so then we can start incorporating into the advisory circular some of those specifications necessary in order to utilize that type of technology when it comes to training, and hopefully eventually give credit for that type of training. I think we heard from one of the earlier presenters that that simulators are the future, absolutely. And I explained my background, my experience with simulation. I'm a big supporter, and so anything we can do to advance that technology and get ahead of it, I'm all supporting. We're going to expend the resources to do exactly that. So that's it. That's the war Hoover there. I think I'll end with that up there. I think that's probably the only thing I have in common with Sean Tucker. We both have airplanes. We flew better in museums now, so that's about it. But so, Brad, I guess there's a Q&A period.
We've got a little bit of time. Anybody have a question or two or comment? Todd, in the back corner.
Hey, first, thanks for coming. Appreciate that. The questions around simulator certification, we are seeing, and obviously Rick deals with a lot of regulatory involvement. We are seeing, like YASA, for example, is now rewriting, the process of rewriting the regulations to align with the new ICAO standard. Is the FAA going to do something similar, or are they going to, or have any decisions been made whether to kind of stay with the existing structure of ATD, FTD, and even though I can't kind of outline some of that, or are there any plans or thoughts at the FAA of moving closer to what the ICAO outlined levels?
Yeah, thanks for your question. And I can say that I have not been part in any discussions, nor have I started any or suggested any discussions to move in that direction. We're wanting to stay with our existing structure. We think our existing structure works. And all we're trying to do, as I mentioned earlier, is to now move with as the technology is moving. How can we get this technology in and out fielded as quickly as possible? So I think from our standpoint, we want to make sure that we keep the barriers as low as possible, especially, and I'm not, talking about the Part 60, I'm talking about under Part 61. We want to keep those barriers low, and we want to make that process move as quickly and efficiently as possible to get it fielded out there for flight training.
Everett, did I hear that you said that you flew for the Navy?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. In relation to Mosaic, is there a closer prediction of when that's going to be done?
So done. So the notice of proposed rulemaking, I think we're months away. And then normally once you get through the NPRM process, and then you get through comments, it's probably going to be like another year or so. So, but it's moving. Recently, within the last year, there was a move to remove the drone aspects of Mosaic, and that was, I think the acting administrator mentioned that probably this past year venture, but the goal was to, hey, let's move this rulemaking along the streamline and not get bogged down by some of these other things. So I think we've really seen some really good progress. My part of it is the airman training pieces of Mosaic, but I think wholly, I think the rule is moving along. We've met with industry recently to kind of share where Mosaic is and some of the goals of Mosaic rulemaking, and we did that in an environment that was conducive to where we are in the rulemaking process in order to share, from again, with the Administrative Procedures Act, we have to be concerned about the ex parte aspects, but we did that in a way that assured that we were within those bounds. And so I think so far the feedback we've gotten is very positive.
Everett, thanks for coming today. With simulators being as sophisticated as they are today, how about the FAA moving to increase the number of hours of simulator time that are can be attributed to various reasons, like single pilot, and so forth. I think that would be a super.
Yeah, absolutely.
Help reduce costs of training.
Yeah, thank you. I certainly support that. I can speak for me. Obviously these things have process to move, so I can't speak for the agency as a whole, but as an individual supporter of training devices and simulators and then the technology as it moves forward, as I've stated, you couldn't have a bigger supporter for that technology than me, and I just think we need to go through that process. And then, and again, we want to make sure that we're doing this safely, we're doing this the right way, but we want to make sure that where we can, we do want to be able to provide that credit for training. And we've heard multiple times, multiple speakers just over the course of the time that we've been here about the cost of flight training and other barriers to getting through flight training to completion, getting students through. And I think that everybody here has seen the valuable use of trainers, even if it's something simple that's within the home, gaming type system, to more complex advanced aviation training devices. So again, as the technology continues to advance, we're really going to be looking at ways that we can do exactly that. We need to make sure that the technology is solid, the training is solid, and therefore you'll be able to turn around and provide that training credit.
Quick question on the NPRM that you are anticipating for the flight instructor renewal requirements with removal of the expiration date for the certificate. Are you able to speak to what any of those recent experience requirements might be? Is the flight instructor refresher course still going to be a part of that, or is it going to be primarily sign-offs or for people that don't do sign-offs that are doing flight reviews? How's that going to impact this?
Yeah, because of where we are in the stage of rulemaking, I can't share details because a lot of those things obviously are pretty considerable. But I think what you'll find is that our team did a fantastic job of thinking through that within the existing system and really trying to do that in a way that is considerate of what's going on.
Two more, you go, and then Bob. Go ahead.
Thank you for answering all these tough questions. It's a topic that came up in Kasana and has come up here as well. Is it seems like the FISDO should have a sign outside owned and operated by the name of the manager. And we've seen a lot of schools have issues with examining authority. We have an ED program. The FAA has a way to solve that problem, examining authority for flight schools that are 141. But it seems like everybody's hitting a wall when it comes to getting their examining authority approved.
Yeah, thanks for your question. And certainly I have heard that it came up during the summer, like you said. And once I returned from that trip, I engaged with our safety assurance office and leadership there to kind of try to find out, is this kind of anecdotal runoff information, or is this something more systemically that's going on, reminding them of the regulatory requirements. So they assured me that they're going to look into that. And they were going to have some leadership meetings to kind of determine, whether that is truly an issue, right? Or whether there may be some localized offices, maybe some localized management decisions just kind of based on resources, personnel, and risk and those types of things. But, I already sent another email this morning about asking the same questions, basically saying, hey, I'm hearing the same things here, at migration. So certainly we're gonna follow up on that just to make sure. So as a standards office, we said make sure that the assurance offices know what the regulations are with respect to that, know what the policy interest is with respect to that. And so now it's just a matter of finding out if there's barriers to that implementation that we're seeing out there.
Thanks, Everett. It appears, though, as though the sole vendor for flight testing for the FAA is making some not-so-subtle moves to squeeze the franchises out in favor of their corporately owned testing centers, which is reducing the testing opportunities. I've heard stories of people having to drive 400 miles to take a knowledge test. Fortunately, we're not that bad yet in our area, but what is the FAA doing, since they do work for the FAA as right now the sole vendor? What are they doing to turn that around before it gets really critical?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I have heard those stories as well. I've seen the news reports about it, and I know the advocacy organizations are working to kind of get to the root causes of some of that and what the effects really are on the community. So, you know, that's not something specifically in my organization right now, but I know the FAA is engaged to address those type of things and working with the advocacy group to, you know, and with PSI themselves to kind of determine what those impacts are. But, you know, I can't say sitting here right now what those specific actions are, but I can try to find out and follow up. Thank you.
David, thank you very much for being here. Thanks for your leadership, and thanks for being a great partner. I have to say, I know safety is always number one, but I really